This is Barbara the Barbarian, Chapter 3, Part 8, Corpse in Chair. Barbara, Nancy, and her dog Russ trekked through the guts of the darkened ship. Nancy held a green flare in her hand.
"How long has this been here?"
Barbara asked in a whisper.
"More than a few lifetimes, if I were guessing,"
said Nancy. The ship itself smelled like dirt and felt like a metal cavern. The forest from outside managed to find its way inside, infusing plants and tech together.
"Are you looking for anything in particular?"
Barbara asked, not content to bask in the silence, being so devoid of communication for so long.
"No, I heard this place. Something in my head tells me when places like these are close,"
Nancy said.
"So you have a radar?"
Barbara questioned.
"Yes,"
Nancy said matter-of-factly.
"Why is it I'm seeing people with these powers? Vina can pull a Superman and use hurricane breath and turn into some sort of wolfman,"
Barbara asked.
"There is a completely logical explanation for all of this,"
said Nancy, who left it at that. Barbara just looked at Nancy as if she would instinctively explain it, but waited in vain for that answer to come.
"What's the logical explanation?"
Barbara said impatiently.
I have no clue, but I'm just saying there probably is a logical explanation for it,"
Nancy said with a shrug. Nancy and Barbara approached a big metal door that had an access panel that was dead from lack of electricity.
"I think we're here,"
Nancy said. Barbara raised an eyebrow, letting whatever it was just play out before even asking about it. Nancy went into her backpack and pulled out a device that Barbara thought looked like an iPad. It illuminated when she touched it. Barbara leaned in, attempting to see what exactly the device was, but all the symbols and jargon went completely over her head, and she considered herself halfway decent with computers. Nancy put her hand on the control panel and the door sparked to life. Barbara looked on in awe, not at the fact she cracked the lock, but more so the fact she could actually generate enough power at all to open the door. Nancy pulled her pistol.
"What the hell are you expecting down here?"
Barbara asked, feeling very under-equipped, with a spear in her hand, standing next to a woman with a Star Wars blaster.
"I don't really know, but I have seen some of these old ships come back to life spitting out drones,"
said Nancy. Barbara wanted to ask Nancy what planet they were on, and if they were capable of ship travel. But now that they seemed in a state of heightened alertness, she didn't feel it the time. Nancy put away her device and gave the flare to her dog, who instinctively took it in its teeth. From the little they could make out, it appeared to be a command center of some sort. As the flare's green light shed away the darkness, it revealed long-dead corpses in flight suits. More skeleton than zombie, thought Barbara. While this did disturb the former Miss Fitness contender, it didn't quite rattle her to the point of inaction.
"Don't see many dead bodies, huh?"
Nancy said to Barbara, noticing the slight apprehension.
"Not so much,"
Barbara quipped, with a touch of snark in her voice. Nancy smirked. Russ approached a huge view screen that had been shattered.
"I'm going to find the flight recorder around here,"
Nancy explained. The track-suited archaeologist pulled out another light stick, turned it on, and gave it to Barbara. Barbara took the light and explored the room, but never leaving Nancy's sight. In a grand chair, one that gave Barbara a chuckle because of how closely it reminded her of Star Trek, was a dusty skeleton in a flight suit that put her in the mindset of a construction worker. She looked at the ancient relic, attempting to guess at what killed him and what he might have been doing. He seemed to be buckled into his seat, with an inactive and demolished console in front of him. From his position, she seemed to believe he was the captain. Barbara saw on his waist a pistol. The first rule of exploring in a movie was to never touch anything, no matter how innocuous it happened to seem, and Barbara did not like disobeying movie logic. Most times. She unstrapped the weapon from the holster that drooped on the minuscule form of the skeleton. As Barbara unsheathed the weapon, the dried bones slumped onto the ground as if it were the foundation that held the form together. The fit woman took a step back as a cloud of dust erupted from the insides of the suit. Nancy looked over from a console she was investigating when she heard the noise.
"I've seen one of those,"
said Nancy.
"See if it fires,"
she added. Barbara looked to Nancy with trepidation, then pointed the weapon at the ground and closed her eyes. The trigger felt oddly plastic to her, but she had no other point of reference to know the difference. Nothing happened. Barbara opened one eye, then tried again, but nothing happened once again.
"Let me see,"
said Nancy. Barbara handed over the gun without a second thought. The gun made a low humming with the introduction of Nancy's touch. She pulled the trigger, but nothing happened for her either.
"Oh well,"
said Nancy, handing the weapon back to Barbara.
"You know what's wrong with it?"
said Barbara, accepting the weapon and taking the holster from the dried bones.
"I don't know exactly. Most of the weapons I find like this are coded for the user that it belongs to, so you're out of luck. I could probably try to rewire it, but it'd take a while even if I could," Nancy concluded. "I'll hold on to it," spoke Barbara, intrigued by the possibility of having a phaser.
"All right," said Nancy, who went back to looking for whatever it was she said she was. Barbara heard the hum of the pistol fade when she put it in the holster she was now wearing. She inspected the clothes of the dead captain, then her own. Though the Amazons gave her traveling gear that covered her better than the animal skin bikinis they liked to wear when they were kicking it around the village, she didn't quite care for it. The entire outfit felt like she was wearing very rough belt leather. She took the captain's flight suit and mused on if she could repurpose it into something she could actually live with wearing.
"I think I found the source,"
said Nancy. Barbara had no clue what that meant, but decided to give it a look-see, since this was technically the reason for their exploration. Nancy stood over a console with her glowing data pad, bright with life. She touched the dead electronical device and it surged with energy. It made a sound as if from a recording. Barbara couldn't understand the language she was hearing on the recording, but if she were to hazard a guess, it sounded a lot like Spanish. Nancy listened intently as if she were hanging on every word, but Barbara had to do her best with attempting to discern the meaning by inflections and tone of voice. There were sounds of panic and explosions that rattled through the weak speakers until the recording went to static. Barbara looked to Nancy to see if she was going to translate. Nancy shook her head somberly.
"They got attacked by privateers and crash landed." "Pirates? Space pirates?"
said Barbara, attempting to get a better grasp of it all.
"Apparently,"
Nancy said in rebuttal.
"Any clue as to what they were doing up there? Why they were even up there?"
said Barbara.
"I have no clue. I'm going to need to figure all this out. Maybe a few days to extract more information. The black box flight recorder was what gave off the signal that brought me here," said Nancy. "What happens after that? I mean, do you have people? Or are you part of a city or something? If there is any going back to where I came from, I need to at least try," said Barbara.
Nancy took a moment. She sat down in the captain's seat that the corpse tumbled out of.
"I do owe you one. Well, technically I owe you and the Amazons, but still. I may be able to point you to this genius character, if it doesn't take too long, that is."
Nancy spoke more as if she were working it out in her own head than freely speaking.
"Cool, I really need some help here," said Barbara. "I'm thinking they want to get you to Annapolis, and if that's it, I can swing that. I guess I can get some supplies there anyways,"
said Nancy.
What about this? Said Barbara, gesturing to the ship itself.
Well, it's been here long enough, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
Is this place dangerous? Do these hill people attack you a lot?
Barbara inquired with concern. They're really the least of what's out here personally, Nancy said with a smirk.
Then why are you out here alone?
Barbara said, attempting to get to the bottom of it, but at the same time trying not to get too deep in her business. Nancy smiled a bit and took a moment longer than the average reply would warrant.
I'm crazy, haven't you figured that out by now?
Barbara smiled, but she really didn't know if it was a joke or a declaration. Look for the next episode of Barbara the Barbarian. Like and subscribe.